Yeah, it just
Well, hello everyone. Yeah, that's right. We're live now. Uh, we normally have people who've been on the radio come in and do a live with me and talk about more about what they talked about on the radio. You were on the last week and weekend before.
weekend before.
That's right. Because I'm sorry, it's just been a blur. Nick, and so if you don't know who Nick Blom is, I want to say Bloom every time, but it's Blom. He is with MID and he's a board of director.
Yep.
For Division 5?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I know I'd get it eventually. Give
Yep,
me a
there
few
you
more
go.
times. Before the show, we were kind of talking because I was looking at some news. I was trying to see if there was any major news for water in California, but I saw a lot of news in other places about people losing water. How Arizona is being cut off from the Colorado River. We don't get any of our water up here from that, but I assume they do in Southern California.
I would think so. Yeah. Not positive.
And then in Utah, people have had wells forever, that lived in their property forever. Their water wells are going down because of the St. George place that is building a huge area, and they're stealing. I don't want to say stealing water. That's not the right term, but they're making mega wells and they're taking the groundwater from them.
Right. And, that's pretty common all over. We actually had some happen in the east side when Oakdale got developed with a bunch of farm ground. All of a sudden, homes were going dry. Homes had wells that were only maybe, 75, 80 feet deep, and guys were putting in 120, 130 foot deep wells and pulling a lot of water. Well, that just lowered the water table just enough to hurt those homes and stuff. And I've heard tell of other guys that, when you have a well in the ground, you have a cone of depression when you start pumping out of the ground, and the cone of depression was reaching farther and farther and farther. Well, all of a sudden, all these wells were starting to go dry. Well, and then the wintertime when the farming's not actually using the wells, that water would come back. But, you can't live with water just in the wintertime.
No, because we need it in the summer too. And that, you have enough water.
Yeah,
right?
I got
okay. All right, no problem. Just making sure. And I think that's what people understand. Water is, the first person who said, hey, let's put water in a bottle and let's sell it. Oh, they won't buy that. Yeah, they will. And now look at how they do it. Water is going to get more valuable than oil and other things eventually because we can't survive without it, and it's huge. If we don't store, and we'll get into storage and all the other stuff that we need to do in California, but they don't, because I always know politicians love a crisis so they can use it for whatever they want to use it for. But my big statement I want to get into today is about how important it is to know where your water comes from.
Absolutely. And, the governor had his whole big thing. They finally come to the realization that conservation is not going to get us out of a drought when human population's only using less than 25% of all the water in the state.
Hold on right there.
Go ahead.
Human consumption only uses 25% of the water.
Less than 25%.
So that means taking shower. Everything we use it for is less than 25% of the water.
The total water used in the state of California. Yes. And so if you conserve, I always tell everyone, if you took 100% of human consumption out of the picture, you're still only saving less than 25% of the water in the state. So, what are we supposed to do with that? Not a lot.
No. So where does it get used the most?
Well, there's agriculture, which we have to eat. We all like to eat. I always say, complain with your mouth full. Thank you very much. And agriculture has to use water. And then you have industry, which is, it's still part of human consumption, but it's a little bit different. And then environment. Environment uses a ton of water. The rivers are flowing no matter what. And so they're using a lot of water in the environment. And so, but I look at it and I go, okay, let's put water to beneficial use. Yes, the environment is important. Yes, we need to keep the fish alive. But do we need to keep the fish alive by killing humans? Or not allowing farmers to grow food? The worst thing we could do as a country is not provide our own food.
Right. But what we could do is provide storage for water because I know in December we had a lot of snow, a lot of rain, and the problem is we don't store it. We don't have enough storage for water. I don't care what they say. We do not. We need to do more storage. We need to make bigger lakes or dams or whatever you need to do to store that water. And we need, because otherwise we're not going to be here.
Right. No, exactly. The governor's plan, he had all these good things to say about, we're going to desal, we're going to build new storage, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Well, Then you've got the extreme environmentalists, because I like to say farmers are environmentalists because
Right.
we try to farm so that we can keep farming. We don't destroy the environment so we can't farm anymore. We like to farm so we keep farming. But these extreme environmentalists instantly, well, you can't build that reservoir that they want to put in Del Porto Canyon out there west of Patterson, because that's just not a good place to put it. Now, that is some of the, I don't want to say godforsaken ground, but you can't really even run cattle on most of that ground because it's just so rocky and hilly. So to me, that's probably one of the most ideal. But of course, then they say, well, you've got the earthquake, the fault lines, this and that and everything. We can build things, and we're not talking hundreds of thousands of gallons of water. It's not a huge reservoir. It's going to be very similar to San Luis Reservoir, not even in size. I mean, it's probably a quarter of the size, but it's pump it into there and then pump it back out. It's not going to be the Del Porto Creek doesn't flow very much. I mean, you're going to get some, but it's not going to fill up a big reservoir. So, you can't have it both ways. You got to have more storage. Below ground storage does work, but it has to be done properly. The problem is underground, that water's moving constantly. So you can't put it in a spot and then hope that it's going to be there 5 years later. It's going to move. Whereas if you put it in above ground storage, it'll be there. I mean, yeah, you're going to lose it in evaporation and that kind of stuff, but you can at least control where it's going.
And so what should we do? I mean, with current storage that we have, should we make it bigger? What do you, you're the water man. I'm the radio guy. I'm the mortgage guy. You're the water man. So what should we do? How should we fix this? What's the best way to fix our issue?
Well,
besides getting rid of the governor.
Well, that would help. I mean, it's kind of, there's federal lands and water, there's state lands and waters, and then there's the public land and waters, which is our local land and water, which is what Don Pedro is. That's ours. And but then you've got a couple of reservoirs around Don Pedro that, boy, if we could connect those together and use the storage as a whole, not as an independent, because there's times when Don Pedro's plumb full and New Malone is only about half full.
Yeah, it's not full at all right now.
So I mean, you can if we could move more water more readily and use all that storage, and it would be very favorable to look at maybe raising a few of the dams. I'm not particularly clear about some of the other ones, but you look at, I mean, just looking at Don Pedro, you can drive around it and go, okay, yeah, we could go a little higher. Maybe. I mean, it'd be worth something to look at. And right. I mean, if you think about the reservoirs, you don't have to go that much higher on top to get a lot of water, because, it is a cone shaped reservoir. And on the bottom, it doesn't hold a lot of water. On top, it's holding a lot of water. So if you go up, let's say even 5 feet or something like that, you're adding a lot of water.
But you're saying be able to like pipe water from Don Pedro to New Maloney's and then back and forth if needed, right? Yeah,
because that's 6 miles from the edge of Don Pedro to the edge of New Maloney's. 6 miles is nothing for a pipe.
Right. Well, then that water from Don Pedro, would go over there. Would you want to have it pump it back?
Well, you could. I mean, the fact of the matter is if you did it as a credit and you said, okay, look, Don Pedro's got all this water we're pumping over, and let's just, to use easy numbers, say we're going to send over 5,000 acre feet of water over to New Maloney's. And we say, hey, if we don't need it in the next 5 years, it's yours to keep. If we need it, you pump us minus a storage fee type thing.
Right.
Now you pump us back 4,500 acre feet of water, which would help both of us, because especially if we have some wet years, which, I mean, I don't know how long you've been around here, but I have been a while. We've had some years where it just, rain and rain and rain year after year after year, and we have more than enough water than we can store. So if we could store it in a bigger area, perfect.
Well, in the last 8 years, we've had a couple of those years, few of those years.
Yeah.
I mean, because I have a cabin in Cold Springs, and we were 195% of snow capacity that year, but then it all went away. Right. They had, then you had, what was that dam that broke the
Orville?
Yeah.
Yep.
And in that period of time, that water being taken out was more than what we conserved for the whole 5 years or whatever.
No, exactly. And the thing is I believe it was 2017 when we opened the spill gate the last time in Don Pedro. It was 97.
Yeah, that was when we had the floods.
The big ones. Yeah, that was when they opened all 3 spill gates, because we had that, what they call that, Pineapple Express, I think, coming.
Right.
But
where it melted all the snow.
Correct.
It got world warm. Yeah.
But I mean, 2017, we opened up one of the spill gates and had a lot of water running down the river. If we could have pumped that over to New Melones, which wasn't full, we could have saved all that water and used it for beneficial use later.
So what a lot of people don't realize is each one of those reservoirs gets water from a different place, right? That comes down from the rivers into them, but they're not connected at all, which what you're saying is let's connect them so we can go back and forth with the extra water, so we don't have to just let it go down the river and then need it later.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, we're all getting our water from the snow in the Sierras. The snow comes down in the mountains, and then it melts, and you get the little creeks and everything running down into either Don Pedro, New Melones, or McClure, either any of those reservoirs that are on the east side of the valley. That's where they're getting all their water from. Now, the important thing to realize is forest management does a huge number on how much water we can get into the reservoir, because if you've got all that snow stuck up in the trees, too much of it goes into the environment and just evaporates away, instead of melting and coming down the hill.
So what you're saying is if we managed our forests, we could thin them out like we should, and we would have less fires, and we would have more water. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely true.
Just that science. One thing, right?
Just that one thing.
And less beetles, right?
Correct. Oh, yeah. No, the healthier forest, you wouldn't have all the dead trees because of the bark beetle and all that other stuff. Yeah, the trees are competing for the little bit of water that does make it down to the ground. And if you have less competition that way, the trees that are still standing survive at a much healthier rate.
Wow. Because I took over the Mike Douglas show one day, and a couple of weeks ago when he was on vacation, and this was brought up because there was a fire up there, and I was talking to a guy, and he was really, I don't think we can manage the forest. So he went from, I won't get into he went, and he's saying there's no way to manage the forest because it's just too much. It's like, yes, you can.
Yeah,
you do it. No. Yeah, I've seen farmers farm land much bigger, and they know how to do it. They do it one section at a time, and they keep moving.
Absolutely. And if you figure it out, and you say, okay, all the state and the federal forest that we have, and there are firms that'll go out there and they'll log it, which I know that's what really irritates the extreme environmentalists.
But we need it.
We need it.
We need the wood. We're getting it from other countries now.
Well, not only that, but I mean, just to save our forest that we have, do you want to have 100,000 acres burn, or do you want to have just a small little fire go through the underbrush and you save that 100,000? All it costs is a few trees here and there.
Well, that one fire in Fresno was 1 million acres.
Yeah.
Right. That we burned over 1 million acres, and people realize we only have 33 million acres or whatever for us. It's pretty easy to 2 choices: burn it or keep it.
Well, and then I can't recall which fire it was, but they had a spot where they had done forest management. And when the fire hit that, it literally just stopped it. And like I said, it was just an underbrush fire. The flames didn't get into the tops of the trees, and it just kind of went across the forest floor until it got to the unmanaged forest again, and then built up again. Yeah.
I think it's as much, people need to get out of the way of what we need to do. And unfortunately, people like to get in the way.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And I want people to realize you're a farmer.
Exactly.
So when you're doing and talking about water and use of it, you're saying, because I know it, I farm, I understand, and I care about water because I want to have water from farming.
Absolutely. And I look at the river. Let's just the Tuolumne River, which is one of the most, if not the most studied river in the country. If we ran it natural, basically is what some of the extreme environmentalists want. They want a natural flowing river. Well, if we do that, then this time of year, there's zero running down the river. That's the whole reason why the salmon would go out to the ocean, stay there in the summertime, and then come back in the winter. And but I don't want to do that either, because we've built our system with some of the dams and the little reservoirs that we had, 100 years ago, so that our farmers could pump water out of the river to irrigate their field, their ground. And so I don't want to stop all the water going down the river, because these guys, they have what they call riparian rights, and they have the right and the ability to pull the water out of the river to irrigate their fields.
So riparian rights means that the property that you own, you have rights to that river that's next to it.
Correct. Yeah, and there's a lot of, I mean, there were a lot of big farms that had riparian rights, and I don't know all the details exactly, but there are some properties that basically touch right up onto the river, but they have zero riparian rights because when the big property was sold into little parcels, some of those parcels didn't get any riparian rights. They sold the riparian right with the bigger parcels that they split off. And so you can have guys that are literally touching the river that have no ability or right to the water that's going down the river.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it makes it harder.
Yeah, much harder. But maybe that they sold it for a reason. They didn't want to farm there, and I don't know.
Yeah, no, and I mean, a lot of times you think of Modesto Irrigation District's been around over 100 years, and maybe 95 years ago they said, well, heck, I've got all this district water. I paid to get into the district. I don't need the river water anymore. So yeah, I'll sell off the river water rights to the neighbor or whatever. And so there's all kinds of different circumstances that could have happened.
Right. And the other thing we need to do is clean up around our rivers. What I mean by that is we're the only place I think that we have junkyards next to the river and run down trailer parks next to the river. In other places, it's like, look at they're using it for recreation, yes, but also they have really nice stuff on the river, unlike what we have in some of these areas, and we need to clean that up and change the way we have our rivers.
And it's hard. I understand it. I mean, you look at some, and I don't want to point any businesses out or anything like that, but like I said, 100 years ago, if you had a dairy next to the river, it wasn't uncommon for heavy rainstorms to put all that manure, watered, whatever, it just ran right off into the river. It wasn't considered a problem at the time. Now that's a big no-no. And I mean, it's kind of like a aha moment that you think, oh my gosh, how did they even, let this happen 100 years ago? But it didn't happen all the time. And it was like, we get a little bit of manure water in the river. It doesn't hurt anything. The fish like to eat that,
Right. And there's probably less. There weren't the huge dairies we have now,
Absolutely.
Right? There were smaller dairies, so it wasn't so bad. Because my grandparents had a dairy, and I worked out it, and it was a Jersey, so it was all for cheese, right?
Little 50 head dairy or something, not the 5,000 head dairies we have.
And
now.
that pond was nasty, but it was not a huge pond, right? That we should clean everything out. And I could see if that accidentally it wouldn't be a major thing, but some of these 5,000 head things, that would be horrible.
It'd be terrible. And and we have industry that. Like you were saying, talking about the junkyards and stuff like that. Well, if it rains, they don't have any way to capture that water. That water's got, grease, oil, and not to the fault of the owners of these junkyards, but, rain falls on a car and gets, if they got the hood missing, gets on the engine's got oil around it, no matter what, that goes down. Well, everything flows downhill, and downhill is into the river. And that's not a good thing either.
Right. So what's going on right now? Any major things coming through that we need to worry about?
Well, they just had another state water control board meeting the other day, and the extreme environmentalists, they had their ducks in a row. I mean, they came with the guns a-blazing, talking about how we need to do the what did they call that again? The Bay Delta plan, which was basically unimpaired flow, meaning that first, and I can never remember the months of the year, but it's 3 or 4 months that whatever flows into Don Pedro, I think it's 30% has to flow straight through. So
no matter what,
that's what they call their unimpaired flow. So basically, we have years like this where we have the drought, and there are times, I think it was like February, March, April, we get some pretty good flows coming into the lake. Well, if we have to get rid of 30% of that or more, I mean, they originally wanted 45%. It doesn't take long for 3-4 years of drought where we're down to what we call the dead pool, which is water we can't even use. Now the fish that are in our lake are dead. We're not able to put any water down the river, so now we've killed basically all the fish that are living in the river because we do put water down year round. Now we've stopped the farmers from able to pull any water from the riparian rights. It's a big disaster. That's why we tried to do a voluntary agreement where we would do a lot of things to help the environmental habitat on the river, which was kind of funny when you're talking about that, because I mean, you look at homeless homelessness is a big problem in our area, and a lot of the homeless go out to live along the riverbanks. Well, they're not walking to a place of business. They're not walking to an outhouse. They're doing that right there. And, it's ruining everything in the river when you've got human feces, human urine, all this stuff going into the drugs that they're using, and all that. They just throw it right into the river. And heaven forbid you're downstream from that trying to do something. Canoeing or even just swimming.
Right. You definitely don't want that.
No.
I want to go back to where you made a statement about Deadpool.
Yeah.
When they take the water. So what's that? So people understand what that means.
There's a level of Lake Don Pedro that when we get to a level so low, we can't, there's no pipes or anything like that we can get the water and use it. So our turbines are not going to be working, generating power.
It's just the water so low below the pipes is what we're talking about.
Basically. Okay. That's the simple way of saying it.
All right. So, because at first I thought you were telling me that it was like horrible water and we can't use it. No. You're just saying it's below the pipes so we can't get to it. We'll just say that.
Yes, okay. Exactly. And so, once we get to that point, there's nothing we can do. And so there's no way for us to get it down the river. So now nobody's happy.
Right.
But
water, fighting words.
No, exactly. And it's become one of those things that, for 100 years in this area, we've tried to be ahead of the curve, I guess. We're trying to do some things on the east side, on the west side, where we're helping farmers who aren't technically in Modesto Irrigation District. And that was only for either their ground was way too uneven, unlevel. They couldn't get district water out there. They didn't have the drip systems that we have now, or they were along the river and they said, hey, you know what? I got riparian rights. What do I need to pay, that much money an acre to get into the district? So we're doing things where we're talking to these farmers and saying, look, hey, not every year, but when we have ample water, how about we sell you guys some water and you use surface water instead of pumping it out of the ground or pumping it out of the river? And anybody who's pumping it out of the river knows it costs them a lot more on electricity than if they were to be able to just get the gravity flow from the district.
Gotcha. Now, we were talking, you were talking is this Stanislaus County? We're talking MID and TID?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't think I said that in the beginning. So people watching this, they wouldn't know who we're talking unless they know who we are.
Yeah. And like for Modesto Irrigation District, we're basically talking from the Stanislaus River south to the Tuolumne River. And then we go basically east of Waterford all the way to the San Joaquin River on the west.
Right. And then coming up in the elections, there's a couple of board seats coming up, right? That's coming up for.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually have two board members who are not running for re-election. One of them is moving out of state, and the other one has decided he doesn't want to run again, which is his prerogative.
Right.
And so in both of those seats, there's two candidates running for those positions. And then we have one incumbent who has actually two challengers. So, it'll be interesting.
So, and each district is where each covers a different area, I assume.
Yeah. The extreme east side, so the Waterford area, is Director Bird, and he and I are on the same rotation. So he's extreme east, and I'm the west end of the district, and the southwest end, I guess you'd call it. And so he and I are good for 2 more years, but basically the heart of Modesto, and then kind of northwest Modesto area, and then northeast Modesto areas up for those seats are open. And we've got good candidates. Do your homework if you live in those districts. Do your homework, and hopefully you guys pick a good one for us, because I want to work with somebody who's willing to work and to help fight for our water.
There you go. All right, Nick, thank you for being here today. Is there anything else we need to know before you go? We didn't hit on.
Farmers are not the enemy. Farmers have been doing this for hundreds of years. We're able to adapt to a lot of things, but really, a lot of times it's just talking about things and trying to figure out how we can do things a little bit more sustainable and farmers have been doing that for years and years and years. Just the number of acre feet of water that we're using to produce, I think, double, almost triple what we used to produce using the same amount of water. It's just amazing. So we will come to a resolution for this, I hope. And like I said earlier, we cannot outsource our food production.
Water is very important. Luckily, we have certain rights here, and we have our MID and TID in this area that's taking care of our water. We don't have to go to the Colorado River, thank goodness.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, the drought and everything else that's going on. And what's so amazing is, and last thing before it goes, the floods they had in Las Vegas, right?
Oh,
just
crazy.
recently. Why, if they could have just stored all that water? I know they had put some storage stuff in place, but that was way more than they thought.
Right.
But if there's some way, can you imagine how much water that could be for them?
And that's what they're saying now is we're going to get more of those rain events versus the normal snow patterns. And even down south, if they have what do they call it? The concrete rivers. And if we could just store the water in the concrete rivers instead of just letting it go right out to the ocean, that'd be an absolute game changer.
We can storm like we do on all the canals around here.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Yeah. Nick, thank you so much again for coming in and coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Glad to be here.
All right. Everybody make it a great day. And we're here Tuesdays and Thursdays, plus every other day in the morning. All right. And on weekends. Seems like all the time.